Deep within the Arctic Circle lies the most dangerous place you could think of to sail a ship. It is a maze of islands and drifting ice, where channels open without warning and close again as fast. Nature here, one sailor wrote, is like a living, malevolent beast. This ice maze stretches for 1,000 miles across the Canadian Arctic, and finding a route across it, the fabled Northwest Passage, was the holy grail of exploration for more than 400 years. But of all the hundreds of attempts, 2 are legends in themselves.
Harry, make reference.
The first, led by Sir John Franklin, was the climax of Victorian Britain's passion for conquest, as arrogant and heroic as any expedition in history. The second, led by the Norwegian Roald Amundsen, was a penniless venture in a tiny second-hand fishing boat. But so revolutionary, it tore up the rulebook of exploration. Both men would pay a devastating price in their battle with the ice maze. By the turn of the 20th century, the search for the Northwest Passage looked more deadly and more impossible than ever. The ice maze had defeated every challenger for 400 years, and with the loss of the Franklin expedition, had engulfed 2 ships and 129 men. And it might have been forgotten entirely, but for one man's ambition and the extraordinary journey that would take him to the heart of the hidden Arctic world. On a summer night in 1903, a tiny fishing boat slipped unnoticed out of Oslo harbor. The man at the helm was a 30-year-old Norwegian called Roald Amundsen. He was setting out in search of the Northwest Passage, a challenge he'd dreamt of since his childhood, when one story above all fired his imagination.
Perhaps no tragedy of the polar ice has ever moved mankind as deeply as that of Sir John Franklin and his men. Strangely, it was the suffering that Sir John and his men experienced that appealed to me most. I also wanted to suffer for something. I wanted to head into the unknown.
As a boy, Amundsen ironically was fascinated by Franklin, this heroic failure really, but I think in Franklin he saw a hero, he saw the person he wanted to be.
He wanted himself to suffer in the ice, to be a kind of a hero who sacrificed something to explore these extremely difficult parts of the world. The history of the earth had only these last places for a man who really wanted to do something great.
The youngest of 4 brothers, Amundsen was born in Oslo in 1872. His father, a ship owner, died suddenly when he was 14, and in his place, Roald became the focus of his mother's ambitions. She wanted him to be a doctor, and Amundsen let her believe he would be.
He got money from his mother to study in the university, but he never went to the university. Amundsen was a man who very early learned to hide his ambitions. And I think his own mother was the first one he betrayed.
In truth, Amundsen was spending his days at the city library, poring over every account of the Franklin disaster. The more he read of the failure of this vast and lavishly supplied naval expedition, the more convinced he became that there was another way. Amundsen was fascinated by the star of a new generation of polar explorers, Fridtjof Nansen. Using small, expert teams, Nansen had skied across Greenland, even to within miles of the North Pole.
Gone was the old idea of the siege, where you took your world with you and set about defeating the place. Instead, Nansen had the approach of a modern mountaineer. You hone your techniques to absolute perfection, and you remain flexible, both physically but also mentally.
The Northwest Passage was now an obsession for Amundsen. At 21, when his mother died, he headed north to the Arctic Ocean. Inspired by Nansen, he was now piecing together a strategy for his assault on the most dangerous stretch of water in the world. Amundsen knew that Arctic seal hunters used small, shallow boats in the ice. And with his family inheritance, he bought one. A battered 30-year-old sealer called a Joa.
What has not been accomplished with large vessels and brute force, I will attempt with a small vessel and patience.
For Amundsen, it was the beginning of his apprenticeship, learning at the feet of the one group of experts the British Navy never thought to consult, the working seamen who for generations had navigated the ice at the edge of the Arctic.
He was looking for people who had an experience coping with ships and with ice. I think it was partly to familiarize with the nature, the landscape, the weather, everything up there.
Amundsen's formula for his assault on the passage was taking shape. A team of Arctic experts manning a fast, light ship. Above all, an expedition capable of adapting to whatever the elements threw at them. Amundsen was 29, unknown and untested, already massing debts as he now tried to raise funds for a challenge the public associated with disaster.
So for the past centuries, navigators have found...
Desperate to win the interest of potential sponsors,
magnetic fields.
he told them his voyage was actually for the good of science, a quest to discover the true location of the magnetic North Pole. Believed to lie, as luck would have it, right on his path through the passage. It was a cunning ruse, but an expensive one. Amundsen needed a course in magnetic observation. By June 1903, his debts were spiraling. Creditors were threatening to impound the Joa. His dream, it seemed, was over. Until one last gamble occurred to him. When the creditors came looking for the Joa, they found her gone. The smallest and most ambitious assault on the Northwest Passage was on its way. Amundsen's crew of 6 was seasoned Arctic veterans. They were engineers, navigators, sealers. There were no scientists, not even a doctor. Academics, Amundsen believed, would undermine his leadership. He'd even won his master's license because he'd read explorers were sometimes overruled by the masters of their ships. On this voyage, Amundsen wanted total control. That morning in his cabin, he wrote,
It was glorious. No anxiety, no troublesome creditors, no tedious people with foolish prophecies or sneers. The world seemed again to be full of spirit and delight.
It was the 16th of June, 1903. Amundsen planned to stop in Greenland for the last of his supplies. Then 13 days sailing would bring him to the edge of the Arctic, and the challenge he'd dreamt of since he was a boy.